Chapter 1676 Destruction of Chaoyu Base. Black armor directly descended into Tianhai City as he looked down on the city from a high altitude, clearly able to notice countless gazes gathering on his body. However, Black Armor's heart was not the least bit bothered by the gazes of these mole crickets. Zhang Yi and Shang Daowen cautiously stood above the Tianhai City's TV tower, their gazes as stern as swords. At this moment, the two of them had already pulled their guards up to the fullest, only waiting for the entrance of the enemy in front of them. Without saying a word, Black Armor directly stretched out his right fist at this piece of earth under his feet, and then blasted his fist fiercely into the earth. A near-transparent black light blossomed out from his fist, transforming into a huge orb that blasted down onto the earth in an instant. The massive energy directly contacted the ground of Tianhai City. At first, there was no reaction, just that the power sank into the deep earth as if a mud cow had entered the sea. However, in the next instant, a vast and incomparable force, an impact so terrifying that it was suffocating, surged out from beneath the earth and shot up into the sky. From the southeastern coast of Tianhai City, the earth was directly overturned, and the thick land was blown up like dust as this force came straight from the direction of the sea to the northwest of the entire city. Zhang Yi's pupil shrunk violently, and his breathing became a few moments shorter. It was because this punch of the Hades gatekeeper had directly blown out the Chaoyu base that was buried deep along the coast of the Eastern Sea. That immense and incomparable base was shaken out from hundreds of meters deep underground, and it was clearly a huge building made of reinforced concrete and cement. There were 3 major bases remaining in Tianhai City today, and Chaoyu base was located right on the seashore. It had not occurred to him that the Hades gatekeepers would be able to detect the movements beneath the earth and dig them out of the ground. Zhang Yi took several deep breaths as he realized that the entire Chaoyu base was finished. Inside Chaoyu base, there were still tens of thousands of humans surviving, and Qin Jingwan led a group of mutants there waiting for the war to end. However, right now, their end was only death. Zhang Yi's heart was a little sad, but he quickly covered up this emotion within his heart. War was bound to kill, and if he was affected by his sadness, then he and the rest of the people in this next battle would die, and the entire Huashu kingdom might fall. Amidst the Chaoyu base that had been shaken out from the depths of the earth, the wails of fear rang out into a chorus. The Hades gatekeeper only glanced faintly before extending the fingers of his own right hand, shooting out a biting black light that penetrated the thick layer of defense. Immediately afterward, raging seawater surged in, submerging Chaoyu base in less than 5 seconds. Among the Chaoyu base, tens of thousands of people simply died. Everyone was watching this scene, but no one said a word, much less spoke out to rescue them. They had to be patient, or else their long-standing arrangement would be undone. Zhang Yi took a deep breath, then he raised his big sniper thunderstrike, aimed it at the Hades gatekeeper, and unleashed his powerful strike once again. Boom! A black light penetrated through space and locked onto the Hades gatekeeper's head. But such a strike was nothing to the Hades gatekeeper in front of him, who possessed terrifying strength. His face was covered with a thick black mask, so his expression could not be clearly seen, but his eyes clearly revealed a rich mockery. Swish! Instead of taking any evasive stance in the face of Zhang Yi's attack, he directly charged head-on. A black light enveloped his entire body and slammed on top of Zhang Yi's attack, surprisingly shattering it hard. His speed was so fast that Zhang Yi even struggled to catch his figure, and was only able to utilize everything follows the trail's prediction ability to predict his next move. So fast. That speed was so fast that Zhang Yi couldn't help but stare with a grave expression, instantly turning on his own 100-fold acceleration. 2 seconds later, the Hades gatekeeper's figure appeared in front of Zhang Yi and Shang Daowen. Facing the duo, he blasted out directly with a simple and unadorned punch in a domineering and incomparable stance. The simplest, but also the most violent way of attacking, the fierce and unrivaled black light burst out from his fist, forming a huge black star in the sky that landed at breakneck speed. Zhang Yi and Shang Daowen had already seen the power of his attack just now, and it was a terrifying power that was enough to destroy 100 miles in a single strike. Even the two of them, who had both reached the Black Chariot level now, were unable to match the power of the attack. And not only was it powerful enough, it was also unimaginably fast. If Zhang Yi didn't possess the time supernatural, he was afraid that he wouldn't even have the chance to open the dimensional gate and escape. "Block him!" Zhang Yi shouted loudly with a stern gaze. He raised his hands high, and the doors of everything under heaven's 3,000 dimensional gates were now not forming an intrinsic boundary around his body, but were all blocking in front of him. On Shang Daowen's body, white light rose to the sky. It was his powerful telekinesis, my thoughts eternal. A powerful psychic barrier was formed, blocking the huge dark star along with Zhang Yi's dimensional gate. The enormous black star descended instantly, directly crushing Zhang Yi's hundreds of dimensional gates with an unstoppable might. Zhang Yi's face changed. He knew that the Hades gatekeeper was very strong and had made ample preparations, yet he realized that he had far underestimated this terrifying existence when they exchanged blows once more. In that battle in Star Island's Misty Valley 2 years ago, when the Hades gatekeeper had struck, he hadn't even used a tenth of his strength at all. "Hold on," Shang Daowen said in a deep voice to Zhang Yi, the two of them, but the main body of defense for this battle. If their defense was breached so easily by the other party, then the entire plan would be all over. "I know." Zhang Yi let out a low gulp, and as the dark stars continued to fall, chaotic light began to emanate from his eyes in different spirals on the left and right respectively. The source of the mutant's power was the mutant itself. The human body itself was a huge treasure, and the power of the human heart was even more endless. Therefore, instead of looking to the outside world for more powerful forces, it was better to first explore one's own inner potential. This was what Zhang Yi had realized from Wang Shuren's Heart Sutra. Time does not come out, space is king. And how powerful can I be when I unite the two forces of time and space and the power that erupts from it? The power of time and space, Zhang Yi had also awakened one after another, but in the past, he had used them separately without thinking of combining the two powers. It wasn't until he reached the Black Chariot level and then obtained the Heart Sutra that he slowly began to develop this combination skill. Of course, it is possible to see through the trajectory of time, and is it possible to time rewind the origin of all things? If it is possible to do so, wouldn't it be possible to bring everything back to its origin? Including the enemy's attacks. Chapter 1677 9 Palace 8 Formations. Facing the Hades gatekeeper's overbearing and incomparable strike, Zhang Yi finally displayed his ability to unite time and space at this moment. His eyes flickered with spirals of luster in different directions as the two forces refuted together, locking onto the attack above the sky dome. Time and space reverse flow. An invisible force was released from amongst his eyes, and no brilliant and magnificent supernatural outbursts were seen, yet the attack of the Hades gatekeeper that fell from the sky showed signs of disintegration in an instant, as if it had been dissolved by something. This was Zhang Yi's new ability, reverse flow of time and space, which could reverse flow back to the enemy's attack and dissipate all of the opponent's attacks. If it was an existence whose strength was lower than Zhang Yi's, this move could instantly nullify the opponent's abilities. However, facing the overwhelmingly powerful Hades gatekeeper in front of him, it only managed to weaken his attacks. However, right now, Zhang Yi's purpose had already been accomplished. After absorbing the origin of Ruan Ping and Silver Armor Thunder, Zhang Yi's supernatural ability index came to 28,000 points. This was the fact that time was still relatively short, and the power that had settled in his body would slowly merge with all of Zhang Yi in the years to come. However, even so, his near-white bishop level of combat power, as well as his newly realized skills, finally allowed him and Shang Daowen to join forces to block the Hades gatekeeper's strike. Zhang Yi and Shang Daowen glanced at each other, and a look of relief flashed within both of their eyes. Although the Hades gatekeeper in front of them was indeed powerful to the point of being terrifying, they were not entirely powerless to fight back. The Hades gatekeeper himself didn't seem to expect that his attack would be blocked by two humans. He clasped his arms up and looked down at them with interest, his gaze even falling on Zhang Yi. Time, space, it's surprising that two powerful forces would be concentrated in the same person's body. Even in our Wuluan clan, there are only a handful of geniuses like you. He spoke to Zhang Yi in a low human language. But unfortunately, you are not our kind after all. If you can't die today, I can consider creating you into a war puppet. Zhang Yi's mind thought of a certain rival he had once had, Sky Dragon King. The other party's odd appearance and sad and desperate demeanor before his death was still Zhang Yi's nightmare. Zhang Yi raised his head and shouted at the Hades gatekeeper, "Do you really think you've won?" The Hades gatekeeper sneered. "Even after fighting so hard, you only blocked one of my casual attacks. You're very proud of yourself, aren't you?" To him, that was nothing more than a casual punch just now. Zhang Yi and Shang Daowen's performance had certainly amazed him a bit, but that was just like the extent to which a small ant had not died after being stepped on by a human. No, the effect we wanted has been achieved. The corner of Zhang Yi's mouth slowly hooked up. He had never been arrogant enough to think that relying on him and Shang Daowen could stop the terrifyingly ferocious god in front of him. Meanwhile, seeing that the Hades gatekeeper had already been led to the hinterland of Tianhai City, Ho Tu, who was seated on a train running through nothingness, slowly spoke. "Begin." The heavenly spirits, who had already dispersed to various areas around the entire Tianhai City, did not hesitate to close their eyes and sink their bodies into the earth like stone pillars after receiving the order. The leader of the heavenly spirits crowd, in his 40s with a small goatee, Big Dipper, Song Ming put his palms together and unleashed his ability. Ming divides the 8 trigrams, and secretly combines the 9 palaces. Zhuge Wuho assisted me. This formation does not trap thousands of troops and horses, but only traps one opponent in the formation. In Xinjing region, the most elite among the Dragon's Roar Guardians were the 36 heavenly spirits. Such a special unit, its leader Big Dipper Song Ming possessed an extraordinary ability 9 Palace 8 formation diagram. Combining the power of the 36 heavenly spirits, it could form a kind of rules category, hypnosis ability, blocking all enemies in a maze. Only, this ability had a huge flaw. When launching the ability, it required a large number of mutants to participate in it, and it was impossible to move. It was possible for these 36 people to try to trap in Hypnosis Epsilon if they just relied on their own abilities. But if they trapped the Hades gatekeeper, they would easily be directly killed by the other party when they unleashed their wide area attack ability. However, if it was combined with Zhang Yi's 5-member squad, it would create an excellent effect. The 9 Palace 8 formation diagram was presented as Big Dipper's ability was unleashed. In an instant, the sky above Tianhai City changed, and thick overcast clouds spread out, instantly enveloping the entire city. Everything was misty and invisible, and only Big Dipper himself could grasp the movements within the formation. The 8 formations can trap thousands of troops and horses, and the Hypnosis and Misty formation are united, so the enemy inside will be disoriented and form a false judgment about space. The Hades gatekeeper saw the strange change between heaven and earth, but did not show the slightest hint of surprise. Instead, he gave an interested gave a cry. It seemed that watching these tiny humans dying and struggling was pleasing to his eyes. How great life is, even mole crickets cherish their lives. But, he opened his arms, the more you struggle, the more I can feel the pleasure of destroying a civilization. Above the Hades gatekeeper's arms, terrifying black energy quickly surfaced, and the feeling he gave off at this moment was simply like a human-sized reaper of love, ready to explode with the terrifying power of destroying everything. However, just at this time, a train roaring sound suddenly came from his ears. Ha! The Hades gatekeeper, who had originally wanted to launch an indiscriminate attack on his surroundings and directly obliterate the array builder, suddenly felt a faint hint of danger. That odd sound caused him to become alert. Subconsciously, he threw a punch towards the area in front of him on the left with a fierce blast. A large area of mist was directly blasted away, and surprisingly, in the void, a huge black train running in midair appeared. On top of the train were 4 silhouettes either crouching or standing. Chaos, Zhang Yi, Great Emperor Gochen, Li Changgong, Thunder God Purin, Alexei Ivanov, and Xidagarba King, Shang Daowen. Within the train, a young girl dressed in black sat by the window, holding a carving sword in her hand as she carved the prototype of the Hades Gatekeeper's likeness. Facing the Hades Gatekeeper's overbearing and incomparable sword, Zhang Yi did not make a move. Instead, Li Changgong, who was the weakest, ran straight forward, swish. With a sound, the snowy long sword was pulled out directly from his waist. I am Heaven's will. Everything in the world will be slashed in front of me with a single sword. Li Changgong's sword sliced through the sky, and the Hades Gatekeeper's overbearing and incomparable attack was instantly slashed against this insoluble absolute rule. Zhang Yi's philosophy was absolute defense is the best attack. On the other hand, Li Changgong's philosophy was the opposite. He believed that attack is the best defense. His ability, as long as it was utilized properly, could be used to extremely counterintuitive effect. This was also the reason why he was still included in the Crusade squad despite only having 18,000 points of supernatural ability index. Chapter 1678, Going All Out. Li Changgong slashed his sword across the sky, directly cleaving through the Hades Gatekeeper's attack. After the strike, Zhang Yi and Shang Daowen were careful to have him stand behind the crowd. Although his attack power was very strong, he was very weak in terms of defense and could easily be killed directly by the Hades Gatekeeper in seconds. Li Changgong was also very sensible and hid behind a few people. The corners of his mouth rose in an uncontrollable smile. Inside the Hades Gatekeeper's eyes, a look of shock appeared for the first time. My attack, it was actually blocked. This seemed to be somewhat beyond his imagination, but he soon realized it as well. It looks like that fellow possesses some sort of ability that can nullify attacks. He stared at Li Changgong above the train and said slowly. But this is all just a meaningless struggle. On his body, a terrifying black supernatural energy suddenly rose up into the sky, transforming into 100,000 sharp swords in the sky, filling the entire sky. Afterwards, he pointed his right hand towards the train, and the black sharp swords in the sky hung down upside down, heading straight towards Zhang Yi and the others. Li Changgong was dumbfounded. Such a dense attack, I can't stop it alone. And once any of the swords fell, the terrifying power contained within was enough to kill him in seconds. Ghost train, shift. Shang Daowen said slowly. Rumble. The ghost train traveled through the void, and seeing that the black sword rain that covered the sky was about to fall, it unexpectedly disappeared in the middle of the mist like a ghost. Rumble. The terrifying sword rain fell on the earth of Tianhai City, mercilessly destroying the land and destroying everything above the ground. The Hades Gatekeeper didn't see the train's shadow and couldn't feel the fluctuations in space. Is it a space ability user? He was right. The driver of the ghost train was none other than Heavenly Jet Star, Dai Sheng. He had long ago covered Tianhai City with space coordinates. And with the help of this 9+8 formation diagram, he could utilize his ability to make the train travel through the void and instantly transfer to other locations. In this way, he could avoid the Hades Gatekeeper's attacks. Although the crowd dodged this terrifying and incomparable attack from the Hades Gatekeeper, they still felt palpitations for his power. This kind of strength is not on the same level as us at all. How exactly is this going to limit him? Li Changgong raised the doubts in his mind. Zhang Yi said, "Don't worry, an existence of this level will be greatly constrained even if he moves above land. At the very least, he won't be able to utilize his strength to the fullest and won't stay for too long. From the beginning, our goal was not to kill him. Rather, it was to delay him for a long enough time." His eyes sank as he said as if he had made some sort of determination, and when it really comes down to the point of no return, we still have one last move to try. Right when Chaoyu Base was destroyed, Zhang Yi had already asked Yang Xinxin to notify the other two major bases to immediately flee Tianhai City. Even the underground refuge wasn't safe anymore at this point. The only way to survive was to flee Tianhai City. Because of the ensuing war, it was feared that the entire Tianhai City, every inch of land, would have the same fate as a plowed field. Roger, brother. Yang Xinxin directly notified the person in charge of Qingpu Base and Yangxing Base at this time. Xing Tian and Xiao Honglian, among others, had already been put into Muyan's shadow space by Zhang Yi, and the two major bases were letting others temporarily manage them. The shelter is no longer safe. Retreat immediately and flee towards the north while the enemy does not have the heart to target you. It must be quick. Otherwise, everyone will have to die. Yang Xinxin's tone was icy cold. She didn't really care about the deaths of the others. It was just her brother's order that she was strictly carrying out. Among the two major bases, after learning that Chaoyu Base had been destroyed and everyone had died tragically, panic was spreading at this time. However, neither Zhang Yi nor anyone else had time to care about them. Fortunately, the bases were better prepared, and there were quite a few snowmobiles. Under the arrangement of the temporary commander, a large number of people were allowed to flee towards the other cities in the north. And on top of this ghost train, Ho Tu was attentively carving the puppet of the Hades Gatekeeper. At this moment, the Hades Gatekeeper's appearance was already in her eyes. The power of Heavenly Divine Path, Enlightened Eye, had been achieved. Ho Tu gripped that puppet tightly, a dark light flickering in her eyes. A little puppet with too bad of a character. Going around wreaking havoc, chain it up. As soon as the words fell, the puppet in her hand crashed down in response, and at her feet, the compartment had turned into a deep pool of darkness. The puppet fell into it without making even the slightest sound. Daixing, driving the train, continued to travel through the void, ears ringing the sound of chains clattering. Two huge demon gods, black and white impermanence, stood up from the middle of the carriages, in front of the huge body. The whole train seems to be like a toy. When Zhang Yi and the others saw this scene, their hearts couldn't help but have a few more moments of anticipation. Ho Tu had finally struck. Zhang Yi was also very eager to see what kind of power this legendary number one existence of Huashu Kingdom possessed. Rumble. The ghost train once again emerged from the void, while the black and white impermanence also arrived at the heels of the Hades Gatekeeper along the chains of fate. The casting of the 6 paths of reincarnation had its space limitations. But with Daixing's ability, Ho Tu was able to keep traveling through the void, managing to keep the Hades Gatekeeper within the range of her ability while not being killed in seconds by the Hades Gatekeeper, confirming her orientation. The lower half of black and white impermanence's body was somewhat illusory, but the huge bodies began to surround the Hades Gatekeeper on the left and right. The Hades Gatekeeper sensed a force of fate locking onto him, and he didn't hesitate to strike in the face of the two gigantic demon gods. The two armor-covered fists filled with monstrous energy and blasted out viciously directly towards black and white impermanence. The two waves of light directly penetrated through the void, even spreading to the area beyond the 8 trigrams formation, causing the oceans to churn. However, it did not take the two demonic gods in the slightest. The black and white impermanence bound the soul-binding chain to his body, and from the beginning to the end, the Hades Gatekeeper did not have any means of resistance. A heavy sense of bondage enveloped his body, as if he was truly bound with shackles that he could not break free of in his actions. The power of the curse? So that's it. The Hades Gatekeeper laughed. It's just that such a petty ability is meaningless to me. Even though millions of shackles are wrapped around me, I am still invincible. After Ho Tu had done this, she faintly said to Zhang Yi and the others, "This is all that I can do right now, so I'll be relying on you guys for the rest. According to our plan, I only need to make him shed the first drop of blood. That way, the battle will be over." Chapter 1679, Atheist. The moment Tianhai City was enveloped by the mists, the elite troops of the Wuluan Empire that had followed the Hades Gatekeeper arrived in Tianhai City as well. They looked at the huge mist in front of them and instantly realized that this was a means laid down by the humans in advance. How could they tell that we will attack this city? Giant Blade Silver Armor asked in confusion. As he said that, he was about to rush into the mists. But soon someone beside him stopped him. This is very wrong. Humans are a very cunning creature. Since they have made all the preparations, it must be to target us. Don't go in yet. The black and white commander who possessed the storm ability flew up and towards the huge mist that enveloped the entire city before him. He took a deep breath before violently spewing out a terrifying gale. The huge storm hung down from the sky all the way to the earth, circling as if it were a giant dragon, before rushing into the mists of Tianhai City. However, the mist that was originally supposed to be blown away didn't even react in the slightest at this moment. This isn't an ordinary mist, but a manifestation of an ability. Blood-Tide Silver Armor walked over and reached out to wave his hand in the middle of the mist, only to find that the mist did not move. Is it light? Giant Blade asked, what should we do? Should we go in? Before his words fell, a sudden and powerful attack in the distance directly broke through the air. It was a golden flame that shot straight towards his body. Cackle! The giant blade violently turned around, and with a single slash of the sword it separated the incomparable blazing flames from mid-air. The flames crashed down into the sea, and the seawater in a dozen nautical miles radius instantly boiled. Far above the sky, a golden raven was flapping his wings, his eyes filled with hatred as he stared at the giant blade. On his back, Black Emperor Chen Xuanba stood with his chest clasped in a dark green military uniform, killing intent boiling in his eyes. From other directions, the United Force mutants who had been waiting for this battle all appeared. Blood-Tide said in a low voice, "Good, now they have all arrived. This time our raid plan failed." Although he said that, his tone did not see any impatience. Because in this battle, their Grand Marshal was personally involved. Therefore, there was absolutely no possibility of failure. Giant Blade sneered and raised the huge curved sword in his hand. Just in time, they're all here, and it saves us from going around looking for them. Just in time to end them all in one pot. Destroy the country in one battle. Giant Blade raised the curved sword in his hand and aimed it at Han Shanzhua and Chen Xuanba in the distant sky. Those two fellows, they escaped with their lives from my hands last time, so I'll just slash them with my own hands this time. As soon as the words left his mouth, he flew directly towards the duo, while his second-in-command, Black and White Commander Frost, followed closely behind. In the middle of the ocean, the roars of sea beasts continued to resound. The duo of Black Tortoise and Cardalus, on the other hand, were eyeing the 4 sea beasts, amongst the 4 silver armors. The sea beast smiled coldly, being provoked by the humans in such a way. Of course he would use his strength in this battle to prove that the Wuluan clan's majesty was inviolable. Roar! He let out a roar up to the sky, and the sound waves spread out along the sea surface, forming a huge tsunami that swept away. A moment later, he transformed into a gigantic and incomparable crimson sea beast and rumbled. With a bang, he crashed into the middle of the sea, bringing his second-in-command straight towards Black Tortoise and Cardalus. The 2 silver armors had already picked their opponents, while the human mutants were very tacitly leading them towards the area beyond Tianhai City, with the aim of creating an opportunity for Zhang Yi, a member of the Slash Squad, to stall the Slash Doors Keeper. On the other side, after Zhugo and Luozhua merged, they assumed the perfect form of Lord of the Corpse Forest, but took on smoke, in the form of Raging Vidra. In the end, it was Newton and Canelo who drew Blood-Tide to the next door city of Linhai. The purpose of the humans was very clear to Silver Armor as well as his men. But they didn't care, because in their opinion, it was extremely foolish for a district human to want to make an enemy of their Grand Marshal. After Silver Armor Blood-Tide, and Black and White Commander Nian, arrived at Linhai City, they faced the combination of Newton and Canelo, and directly said mockingly, "No matter how much resistance you put up, you won't be able to stop us from exterminating this kingdom. The end has already been predetermined and cannot be changed." Newton's expression was cold. Oh? He pushed up his glasses, a morose light flashing amongst the lenses. What is it that gives you such confidence? It is strength. In front of absolute strength, all calculations are meaningless. To you humans, we, the Wuluan clan, are like gods. Blood Tide raised his hand and pointed his index finger at Newton. Soon you will understand how ridiculous your behavior is. Newton didn't utter a single word, but instead raised the huge and weird hand cannon in his right hand. Sorry, but I for one am an atheist. As soon as the words fell, the trigger in his hand was pulled, and a terrifying and incomparable force erupted violently. The Epsilon-level mutants all picked their respective opponents, and the remaining hundreds of green-armored mutants were not idle at all. They looked at the huge city shrouded in mist in front of them, and a captain analyzed the terrain before making a direct judgment. The enemy has created such terrain, and although it cannot harm our invincible Grand Marshal, we have to fight for our time when we act on top of the land. Now, immediately clear out all areas around this city. Destroy the mutants, or devices, that created this misty area. Hundreds of 9,000 points or more mutants were just junior soldiers among the Misty Valley troops. But when looking at the human world, they were all strong at the investigative captain level. In the event that the Epsilon-level mutants didn't make a move, they could sweep through the entire region. And at this time, Xiao Liu appeared in front of them with almost every mutant above 9,000 points in the entire Huashu Kingdom. Now this battlefield, it's up to us to take over. Xiao Liu held a huge black gun in his hand as his icy gaze swept over all the green-armored warriors. He raised the gun in his hand and pulled the trigger at the green-armored warriors in front of him. Weapons that had been empowered by metal frenzy, even the most ordinary pistol could explode with a powerful and unparalleled might. What's more, the Epsilon level appearing on such a battlefield was basically a descending blow. However, the expected killing did not begin. Because just as his attack was about to fall, a huge figure violently emerged from the middle of the seawater, and black ethereal light flashed as it bulleted away Xiao Liu's attack. After Xiao Liu got a good look at the huge figure, he couldn't help but have his pupils tighten, and the shock in his heart was incomparable. That huge body, that exquisite and smooth physique like porcelain, was clearly the Azure Dragon that was rumored to have died in battle. Chapter 1680 Swimming Battle. At this time, the Azure Dragon had already lost its original appearance, covered in pitch black, maintaining the posture of a huge water azure dragon god. However, his eyes were filled with ferocity and did not have the slightest bit of human emotion. When Xiao Liu saw this, an uncontrollable rage immediately appeared on his face. Azure Dragon was a soldier just like him, and they had spared no effort in defending their family and country in the years after the end of the time. He could accept Azure Dragon's death in battle, but he could not accept that he was so insulted by his enemies after his death in battle. Azure Dragon, let me send you on your last journey. The black spear in Xiao Liu's hand changed its form drastically with the infusion of his supernatural energy, and turned out to be a strange dragon-shaped great rifle attached to his arm. He raised the dragon gun in his hand and roared, "Brothers, follow me on and kill all these foreign scum." Roars shook the heavens as the elites from the various regions throughout Huashu Kingdom roared and rushed towards the green-armored mutants' forces. In the center of the battlefield in Tianhai City, Ho-Tu used the power of the heavenly divine path to inflict a curse on the Hades gatekeeper. This cursed power, once any mutant below the Black Chariot was struck, they would directly lose their fighting strength. The Hades gatekeeper, on the other hand, looked almost unaffected by it. His gaze scanned the void, waiting for the ghost train to emerge from the void while trying to find a way out of the maze in all directions. But at this moment, he was a headless fly in the eyes of Zhang Yi and the others. Although he was flying towards what he thought was a straight line, he was always circling around in the same place. The most terrifying thing was that this formation affected not only the four directions, but also the top and bottom. Even breaking out towards the sky would not help. This was a mere hypnosis formation, and the only way to leave was to first kill these people on the ghost train, and then uproot the 36 heavenly spirits, the cornerstones of these formations. The ghost train reappeared, sailing diagonally across the void in a manner that defied the rules of physics. Zhang Yi and Shang Daowen were in the front, using the dimensional gate and the telekinesis barrier to make a defensive stance. As for the one responsible for the main attack, it was Thunder God Purin, Alexei. This usually very mute uncle was once just an ordinary lumberjack in the Arctic Ice Plains farm. But after the end of the world, he had grown amazingly, and was now a top figure in Fremon's pantheon. The appearance of the ghost train was so sudden that the Hades gatekeepers were unable to predict from which direction they would suddenly appear, yet Zhang Yi and the others were fully prepared. The moment the train appeared, Alexei raised both of his hands with two wood-cutting giant axes. Ho-ah-ah-ah-ah! A low, bear-like roar came from his throat, and a vigorous supernatural energy instantly surged out from around him, transforming into an incomparably brilliant silver-colored thunderous light that completely enveloped the entire ghost train. Boom! Above the sky, the sound of thunder gusted, and thunder from the sky slashed down, landing on top of his raised battle axe. The thunder drowned him, and as it attached itself to his body skyrocketed at a speed visible to the naked eye, so much so that the plain combat uniform on his body was directly bursting, revealing his toned to jaw-droppingly muscular body. This was Alexei's ability Tyrant. The fighting style that belonged to a fighting nation was always the most simple and heroic, making the blood boil. Even in the face of this godlike existence that seemed to have a possible 40,000-point supernatural ability index, he still slashed out his battle axe without fear. The battle axe in his right hand slashed down through the air, and a huge ray of lightning transformed into an axe blade in the shape of a half-moon and slashed down against the Hades gatekeeper's head. Li Changgong was hidden behind Zhang Yi, ready to cooperate with them to launch a fatal strike. Only one chance was needed. Zhang Yi and his ability to cooperate would be able to form an ultra-long-range sniping kill. It didn't matter even if they couldn't kill the Hades gatekeeper, their goal was simple from start to finish. Either stall for enough time and wait for the underworld's heavenly punishment to descend. Either that, or make him shed the first drop of blood and then utilize the Hotua's ability to curse him to death. Facing that huge thunder battle axe, the Hades gatekeeper raised his head and gently waved his left hand. While that huge thunder battle axe was directly crushed by him with one hand. Alexei followed up with the battle axe in his left hand and slashed across towards his waist, but it was similarly blocked by the Hades gatekeeper with one hand. Alexei's eyes were filled with infinite rage. In his opinion, this was a great humiliation. Oh! His two arms, which were almost twice as thick as Zhang Yi's thighs, swung the thunder tomahawk crazily, and it was hard to imagine that such a heavy tomahawk, in his hands, was actually swung with a stumpy image. Rumble! Ka-ching! Thunder raged throughout the entire space. The wild lightning was like a thunder snake, hissing and biting towards the Hades gatekeeper. Li Changgong's right hand gripped the hilt of his sword, his EEI stance was already made, and he had been storing up his momentum for a long time, only waiting for an excellent opportunity to deliver a fatal blow. But Hades' gatekeeper at this time, facing this attack, seemed to be a little annoyed with the wave of his hands. A black energy centered on his body, sweeping away in all directions in an instant. An indiscriminate attack. It directly shattered Alexei's thunder and then came towards Ghost Train. Flash! Zhang Yi shouted in a hurry. Swish! The Ghost Train directly disappeared into the void and headed to wherever else it was, only for a huge sinkhole with a diameter of tens of kilometers to reappear in the middle of Tianhai City. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before the entire Tianhai City would completely become a barren land, with no more signs of human civilization to be seen. Zhang Yi's heart was only glad that he had made preparations early and put away all the Tianhai fortresses. Otherwise, even if the fortresses were made of barrier stone, he was afraid that it would be difficult to block the attack of the Hades gatekeepers. Space ability users are pretty good. Twice and thrice his attacks fell short, the Hades gatekeeper wasn't agitated, but rather cupped his chin with one hand with interest and faintly analyzed, fleeing, "Are you?" "I'm not a space ability user, so I can't pinpoint the location of their escape." "Then, wouldn't it be fine to destroy everything within sight?" He raised his head, no longer choosing to find his way amongst the mists, but continued to quietly wait for the next attack to come. What to do? Our means of attack are simply like scratching an itch to him. It was said that if we make him shed a drop of blood we'll win. But now it seems like a dream. Zhang Yi frowned and said, "The difference in strength is indeed still too great. Even if we have all the advantages of timing and location, it's still hard to do so." Shang Daowen had to admit this as well. However, he followed up with, "But right now, at the very least, we haven't allowed ourselves to fall into complete passivity. While he is still afraid of heavenly might and hasn't gone all out, we need to utilize this gap to make him bleed."